The air in my Vermont kitchen still smelled faintly of white peonies and almond cake. The soft morning light filtered through the lace curtains, landing gently on the polished oak table that had hosted toasts, tears, and generations of secrets. Across from me sat my daughter, Isabel, her cheeks still holding that radiant glow that weddings seemed to leave behind, part magic, part exhaustion. 2 days ago, she had walked barefoot down a garden aisle beneath a string of paper lanterns, her voice shaking as she said, "I do," to a man I barely knew, Landon Ashcroft. He sat beside her now, with the same quiet arrogance that had shadowed his smile since the rehearsal dinner. Dressed in a linen blazer, one arm lazily draped behind her chair, he looked perfectly at home, as though he'd always belonged in this house. His gaze flicked to me with something between affection and assessment. Then, almost casually, he slid a thick manila envelope across the table. It stopped just short of my teacup. "Just something we thought might make things easier," he said smoothly. "You know, alignment, future planning." He said it like he was doing me a favor. Isabel smiled at me, eager to please, like she always had been. "It's just a formality, Mom. Landon's brilliant with finances. We're setting up a family trust for when we have kids. You understand, right?" Her voice was light, full of hope and intention, but my heart dipped in my chest like a stone in still water. I hadn't even looked inside, but I already knew what lived in that envelope. It had weight both in paper and purpose, typed in an efficient cold serif font on the front. Fiona Lawson. My full legal name. No, Mom, no warmth. Landon stood and reached for Isabel's hand. "We're flying to Corsica in the morning," he said with a grin. "But this'll just save time later." I nodded, expressionless. I didn't open the envelope. Not yet. I waited until I heard their car disappear down the gravel drive lined with sugar maples and watched the dust settle into silence. Then I picked it up. My hands trembled not with fear, but with the kind of fury that comes when you realize someone thinks you're easy prey. A woman alone. A woman aging. A woman they assume has no claws. But I did. And they were sharp. I sat at the edge of my reading chair by the window, the envelope open on my lap. The legalese sprawled across the pages like a spider's web, each clause calculated, each signature line a noose. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a blueprint. A document that assumed I would consent to allocate a substantial portion of personal and residual assets into a new Ashcroft family trust managed solely by Landon. No mention of me, no co-signing, no rights. He didn't know what he was reaching for. And that's what made it dangerous. They all thought I was merely comfortable, a retired marine biologist who spent her final working years as a consultant for a coastal conservation NGO. A woman living quietly on a pension, a lakeside house, and the memory of her late husband, Thomas. But no one knew the truth about Thomas, about what he left behind. 20 years ago, he invested in a small biotech company in Geneva, an early-stage firm developing enzyme therapies for rare diseases. He never told anyone, not even me, until the week before he died. I remember the day. We were sitting on the back porch as the sun dipped behind the pine trees. His voice was faint but steady. "If anything ever happens to me, Fiona," he said, "you'll find a key in the cigar box. Safety deposit box, 314-inch, Zurich. Don't ask questions, just follow the steps." I did. It led to a blind trust under a shell company named Harborstone Dynamics AG. No connection to me on paper, just a signature code and a biometric scan. Inside, $48 million. I transferred it to a layered set of holding accounts under a renewable energy grant program one I'd consulted on years ago. It was invisible, clean, untouchable, and thank God. Because now, a charming man with perfect teeth and a designer watch thought he was about to swindle a widow out of her last assets. He didn't know I could track dolphin migration patterns across oceans with only a satellite tag and a hunch. Reading his contract, I recognized the pattern. Control the money, isolate the family, build dependence, then consolidate. He was counting on my silence, my love for my daughter, my ignorance. But I had no intention of refusing outright. No, that would be too easy for him to maneuver around. I was going to lay a trap so gentle, so believable, that he'd walk into it smiling. The bait? A fabricated financial disclosure. A believable but unimpressive snapshot of my estate. I'd let him taste the scent of money just enough to make him greedy, not cautious. And when he reached for it, I'd be ready. The next morning, just as the lake mist began to lift and the sunlight hit the porch steps, I heard a sharp knock at the front door. Not a polite knock. A lawyer's knock. I opened it to find a man in a slate-gray suit holding a leather briefcase and an envelope nearly identical to the one Landon had left. His posture was crisp, his smile weaponized. "Good morning," he said, stepping forward without waiting for an invitation. "Mrs. Lawson? I'm Cole Weaver, legal representative for Mr. and Mrs. Landon Ashcroft. I'm here regarding an urgent financial matter." I didn't move. "My daughter's name is Isabel Lawson," I replied evenly. "She kept her name." He hesitated just a moment, just long enough. "Of course," he recovered. "My apologies. May I come in?" Everything in me wanted to slam the door, but I didn't. I stepped aside and let the snake into my home, because I needed to understand the scope of their plan. He made himself comfortable at the dining room table, setting his briefcase directly on the surface where I'd once helped Isabel with science projects and birthday candles. "This document," he said, sliding it toward me, "is an emergency addendum to the family trust proposal. It's designed to fast-track asset structuring for both parties." I didn't touch it. He flipped to a page near the back. "Here's where it gets particularly relevant. Section 12.3 Parental Estate Disclosures and Pre-Inheritance Holdings." He tapped the line with a manicured finger. "This clause simply asks you to declare your current assets so we can ensure the trust reflects an accurate valuation." I leaned over and saw her signature. Isabel's. Fresh ink. Familiar script. She had signed it, probably without even reading it. My chest tightened. He smiled, sensing victory. "They're young," he said lightly, "and they trust each other." "Wrong answer?" I said quietly, folding the paper shut. "Tell Landon I'll respond when I choose. I don't sign anything without my own legal counsel." A flicker crossed his face. Disappointment, maybe. Or irritation. "Understood. May I ask when they can expect—" "You may not," I cut in, already rising. I opened the front door. "This meeting is over." He packed up slower than necessary, clearly unaccustomed to being dismissed. When the door clicked shut behind him, I stood in the silence of my kitchen and exhaled through my teeth. I was no longer dealing with charm. I was dealing with strategy. And it was time I got my best player on the field. I picked up the phone and called Victor Green, Thomas's oldest friend. The man who had helped me hide the fortune in the first place. The one person left who knew the whole truth. "Victor," I said, "they've started the game." Victor didn't waste time with pleasantries. After everything he'd helped me bury assets, identities, intentions, he understood urgency. "They want to draw you in legally," he said after I filled him in. "You sure you want to play?" "I don't want to win," I said flatly. "I want him to lose. Spectacularly." There was a pause on the line. Then his voice softened. "You're protecting Isabel." "I'm protecting what Thomas left me," I replied. "And yes, that includes our daughter." Victor understood. He always had. We worked quickly. The next 48 hours were a blur of encrypted calls and drafted documents. We built a false financial snapshot. $280,000 in modest post-retirement funds, some outstanding medical bills from Thomas's final treatments, a recently matured annuity, all details pulled from real accounts, blended with believable fiction. We made sure the document looked authentic, stamped, notarized, and with a quiet, tragic tone. It told the story of a widow who had done her best to make ends meet, who had nothing left but her dignity and a shrinking savings account. Then came the digital breadcrumbs. Victor created a shallow banking trail with one visible account, held under my name, with access records from a decade ago. We made it just traceable enough for someone like Landon to stumble across if he thought he was clever. Once complete, I placed the file on the desk in my home office, unlocked, slanted slightly askew. Inviting. Then, I waited. 4 days passed in silence. Then, one morning, my bank called. "Mrs. Lawson," the voice on the line said carefully, "we've detected suspicious activity involving a dormant grant-related account. Someone attempted access through an outdated user portal using your old credentials." My heart didn't race, it sank heavy and low. "That account has been closed for years," I said calmly. "Do you have an IP address?" "We do. It traces to a login attempt from a resort in Corsica. The credentials were entered from a device registered to someone named Isabel." I closed my eyes. He was in her tablet. He was inside her passwords, her digital life, her future, and she didn't even know it. I sat alone in the kitchen, the late sun casting long shadows across the table. One hand gripped my teacup. The other curled into a trembling fist. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was theft. Calculated, methodical, quiet. But he'd made one mistake. He'd underestimated the woman he thought was fading with age. The next morning, I brewed chamomile tea and dialed Isabel's number. My voice was warm, steady, almost sweet. "Hi, darling. How's Corsica?" She sounded sleepy. "Gorgeous. We just got back from the cliffs. Why?" I let a pause settle. "Tell Landon. I've had a chance to think about the paperwork. He's right. It's best to get ahead of things. I'd like to go over everything with you over lunch. My treat." A beat of silence. Then her voice brightened. "Really? Mom, that's wonderful. I knew you'd understand." She was relieved, maybe even proud. I ended the call and stared into my tea until it went cold. The next afternoon, we met at a quiet garden cafe tucked into a side street in Montpelier. I chose it for its privacy and its white noise. The sound of wind chimes and fountains would cover any sharp words if things turned tense. They arrived together, right on time. Landon in a cream suit, Isabel in a sundress, her hair pulled back loosely like she had as a teenager. She looked nervous. He didn't. We made small talk about travel, weddings, the wine list. Isabel ordered lavender lemonade. Landon ordered a gin martini, confidence in a glass. Then, as if remembering something casual, he reached into his satchel and pulled out the same manila envelope. "I brought the paperwork just in case," he said with a disarming smile. I nodded and accepted it, then reached into my own bag and retrieved a much thinner file. "I brought something too," I said, setting it gently on the table. "It's a full disclosure of my financial situation." He blinked but recovered quickly. I slid the decoy document toward him. "It's all there, after medical costs, some property tax adjustments, and finalizing Thomas's estate. There's not much left, just around $280,000, most of it in a structured annuity." He flipped it open, scanning. His expression was unreadable, but the shift was subtle. The corner of his jaw tightened. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. Isabel leaned forward. "Wait, Mom? That's it?" I gave her a soft, apologetic smile. "Your father had more liabilities than I ever told you. I didn't want to burden you." Landon chuckled politely and stood. "Excuse me, I need the restroom." He left his drink untouched. As soon as he was gone, Isabel looked at me. "Mom, did you really threaten him?" "No, sweetheart. I simply said I wouldn't sign anything without a lawyer present. Maybe that scared him." She didn't speak. She only looked down at her lemonade, swirling the straw in slow circles. And I realized then he hadn't given up. He was just regrouping. 2 nights later, just after I'd locked the back door and turned off the porch light, my phone rang. It was my private banker. "Fiona," she said without preamble, "there's been an attempted withdrawal full amount from one of your legacy retirement accounts. The one ending in 7093. I stood frozen. "That account's inactive," I said. "Dormant. And it only ever existed to anchor the decoy file." "I know," she replied. But someone tried to move the entire balance. The request came through your old digital banking profile. My voice dropped. Do you have a device signature? Yes. An iPad Air, registered to an Isabel Lawson. IP address traces back to a resort in Corsica. It wasn't a guess anymore. It was fact. He'd gone in through her. He wasn't just playing the long game, he was using her access, her trust, her own technology against her. I stared out at the lake, black and still beneath the moonlight, my reflection swallowed by the dark. Then I picked up my phone and sent a single message. Come to the house. Alone. I made the lemon cake you love. She arrived the next afternoon, hair still damp from the drive, her eyes wary. She sat at the kitchen table like she had 1,000 times before, only now, her posture was guarded. I need to talk to you, I began gently. Last night, someone tried to drain my retirement account. What? Her voice cracked. What are you talking about? I slid a printout across the table. It was done using your tablet, from your hotel, while you were asleep. Her face drained of color. No, he wouldn't, he said. I waited. He said you were paranoid, that you were spying, that you threatened to ruin us. I reached across the table. Isabel, he found a document I wanted him to find, and he tried to take everything I let him see. Tears filled her eyes, angry and confused. You set him up? You baited him. I protected you, I said, my voice tight. I had to see what he'd do when he thought no one was looking. She stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. This is insane! You don't trust anyone! You're trying to break us apart! No, I said softly. I'm trying to stop someone from breaking you. He loves me, she whispered, on the verge of tears. Then ask him, I replied, why he was on your tablet at 2:14 a.m., accessing financial databases under your name. She shook her head, lips trembling. I can't do this. And she was gone, just like that, leaving behind the faint smell of lemon and the echo of everything I feared. The house was silent, except for the ticking of the old brass clock in the hallway. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone beside me, untouched lemon cake congealing under its sugar glaze. My heart wasn't broken, it was waiting, holding itself together by a thread. Then, at 11:46 p.m., my phone lit up. Victor. I've got it, he said. His voice was sharp, focused. IP traces confirm Landon initiated the transfer attempt. He used Isabel's device, her login credentials. I've also recovered cached browser history. He's been researching how to override multi-factor authentication on high-value trust accounts. I closed my eyes. He's methodical, I murmured. Patient. Calculated. He's not patient anymore, Victor said grimly. He's desperate. There was a pause. Do you still have the wedding footage? I turned to the carved cedar box on my bookshelf. It held a thumb drive from Isabel's best friend, who had recorded the reception on her phone. I do. Send it all, Victor said. Men like Landon always slip somewhere. Arrogance is loud when it thinks no one's listening. That night, I watched 5 hours of shaky clips, the toasts, the dances, Isabel's first laugh as a married woman. And then, buried deep in a side-angle recording, just as the sparklers were being lit, Landon, standing with 3 of his groomsmen. One of them lifted a glass. So what now, Ashcroft? You finally married rich? Landon smirked, raising his drink with too much confidence. Not yet, he said. Give me a month, you'll see. There it was, not a joke, a confession. His tone wasn't playful, it was cocky, cold, a man proud of his scheme. I paused the video and watched it again, and again. Then I copied the clip to a separate drive and slid it into a padded envelope. The next morning, I drove into town and dropped it in Isabel's mailbox. No note, no message, just truth. 2 days passed. Then, on a gray and silent afternoon, she arrived at my door. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were rimmed in red, her hands shaking, as she sat on the edge of my couch. "I watched the video," she said, voice raw. "I asked him about it. I didn't speak. I let her unravel it on her own. He said it was a joke," she continued, "but I checked his browser history. Mom, he's been digging for months. He even had screenshots of your old Zurich login." She began to cry, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to believe it." I sat beside her and pulled her close. Just then, her phone buzzed. She glanced down and her face turned white. "It's him," she whispered. "He says he's lawyering up. He says if I try to leave, he'll sue me for fraud." I met her eyes. "Then it's time," I said, my voice like steel. "We show him who he's really dealing with." Victor had already prepared the final piece. A full digital forensic report, IP logs, session timestamps, device fingerprints, and the wedding video, the crown jewel of arrogance, preserved in grainy footage. We scheduled the meeting for a neutral law office in Burlington. I told Isabel she didn't have to come, but she shook her head with a quiet fire I hadn't seen since she was 10 years old, and stood between a stray dog and a passing truck. "I need to see his face," she said, "when he realizes I'm done." The receptionist led us to a glass conference room overlooking the lake. The view was peaceful, everything else was not. Landon arrived 10 minutes late, wearing his usual performance-polished loafers, perfect hair, an air of invincibility that reeked of someone who thought he'd already won. He stopped short when he saw Victor seated in the corner. "Who's this?" he asked, feigning confusion. "Insurance," I replied smoothly. "Just here to observe." Victor slid a plain folder across the table. "A courtesy copy," he said. "Just so there are no misunderstandings." Landon opened it. Within moments, the color began to drain from his face. The browser history, the access logs, the device ID from Corsica, the video transcribed, time-stamped, and printed on legal-grade paper. He flipped through the pages, faster now. By the end, his hands were trembling. "There's no crime here," he snapped, his voice a notch higher than before. "Not yet," Victor said calmly. "But we have enough for multiple investigations. Digital identity misuse, financial coercion, cyber intrusion. Shall I continue?" Landon turned to Isabel, eyes dark with betrayal. "You told them?" She didn't flinch. "No, Landon, you did." He slammed the folder shut. "What do you want?" I met his gaze, steady and unblinking. "You'll sign a full annulment, effective immediately. You'll walk away with nothing. No court battle, no press." "And if I don't?" he sneered. Victor pulled out another folder. "Then, this entire report, along with the video, goes to the Vermont Attorney General's office, and to a reporter at the Lakewood Sentinel who's been sniffing around a series of suspicious trust fund drainings. He's very interested in men who marry into wealth and disappear when things go sideways." Landon stared at the papers like they were about to ignite. Isabel reached into her bag, pulled out a pen, and slid it across the table. Her voice didn't shake. "Sign it." And he did. He didn't look at either of us as he gathered his things and left, the door swinging shut behind him with finality. Silence fell like snow. Isabel turned to me, tears brimming but not yet falling. "It's over," she said. "No," I whispered, pulling her into my arms. "It's safe now." We sat there in stillness. No one moved, no one spoke, just two women, bone-tired but standing. That evening, we made dinner together in the same kitchen where everything had begun. As the pasta boiled and the wine breathed on the counter, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Is it true?" she said softly. "About the money?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, 48 million, hidden for years." She blinked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to protect the money from strangers," I said. "I wanted to protect you from what money does to people who think they're entitled to it." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "No more secrets," she said. "No more," I agreed. We sat there long after the plates were cleared, the candles still flickering. And I realized then, the real inheritance Thomas had left me wasn't numbers on a ledger. It was wisdom. The wisdom to wait, the strength to act, the courage to love and protect someone long enough for them to see the truth for themselves. And that was a fortune I could finally share freely, not just with my daughter, but with the woman she was finally becoming.